The Sweeping Psychedelics Act of 1970 that they passed essentially to target civil rights activists and anti-war activists. That's what they did. They wanted to go after the hippies. And they went after the hippies with MK Ultra, with Tom O'Neill so brilliantly outlines in his book Chaos. They went after it and they created the Manson family. They created that family. They taught that guy how to do that so that that guy would kill people and he would be a psychopath, and now hippies would be psychopaths. And then all this anti-war shit would just get stopped by sensible people. Then Schedule I, everything, psilocybin, marijuana, all down the board, everything becomes Schedule I, the most illegal of illegal things. So all these people who are experiencing, all these Ken Kesey people and, you know, all the LSD people of the 60s, all those people become criminals instantly. And they just threw water on the whole movement, and it worked. It really worked. It was Nixon and all the people that were in charge back then. If you look at what happened from 1960 to 1980, this confusing era of the 70s where the effects are wearing off, and then you get into the 80s and everybody's doing coke and they have makeup on and they have big hair and the music sucks. It's like something happened.
The day I found the book, I knew I was supposed to destroy it. But there was something inside me I wouldn't let go.
Why is it illegal for us to have this?
I don't know.
It's not right, Paul. Whatever happened, this was our world. We deserve to know where we came from, no matter what the pact says. I know that makes you uncomfortable, but I also know it's true.
Psychedelic inspired 100%. And there's something about throwing water on that in the 1970s that I think has done a massive disservice to our civilization, a massive disservice, because it's equated these things with people that have poor discipline and bad social skills and ne'er-do-wells who fail in society. And that's not true, fortunate, because of these stupid laws that were passed 50 years ago. We've gotten ourselves in this weird crunch where we've made things illegal that could massively help people progress in life and sort things out. This is other men our age that haven't had these experiences maintaining this control on them in a completely ignorant way. They don't even know what they are. They don't know what these things are. They don't know what the experience is, and yet they want it to be kept out of the hands of kids. We got to keep it off the streets. We've got to keep drugs away from our society. And you don't know what you're talking about. It might be why we're here, and it also, the absence of it, might be why we're so fucked up. It might be why we're so disconnected, why we're so disjointed, and our society is so hypocritical. I mean, the most pro-life people are also pro-death penalty. It's like across the board, everything. The people that, you know, want no crime, but don't want to stop the emergence of crime by funding programs to try to fix the inner cities. And they want to, our whole thing is disconnected. And I have a feeling that a big part of that is that we have not been given access to tools that have helped people literally become what we are today. And if they're to, you know, if you read Brian Murarescu's work, and if he's correct, and these people that are studying the Eleusinian mysteries and the literal emergence of democracy as we know it, probably all of it came out of psychedelic experiences.
The role of government in controlling our consciousness. And in my opinion, the so-called war on drugs is one of the fundamental abuses of human rights that have been undertaken in the past 60 years. It should be a Republican issue. If I understand the Republican Party correctly, the Republican Party believes in individual freedom for adults as much as possible, and particularly the freedom to make choices over their own bodies. But in the case of even cannabis, I know this is one of the great things that's happening in America. It's happening state by state, where cannabis is being legalized, and that draconian hand of government is being taken off the back of people who are consuming a medicine that is far less harmful than alcohol, which is glorified in our society. We cannot say that we are free if we allow a government to dictate to us what experiences we may or may not have in our inner consciousness while doing no harm to others. And the point there is, we already have a whole raft of laws that deal with us when we do harm to others. Do we really need laws that tell us what we may or may not experience in the inner sanctum of our own consciousness? I think it's a fundamental violation of adult sovereignty. And we would have much less drug problems if these drugs were all legalized and made available to people without shaming them, without punishing them in any way, but just part of normal social life. And then you could be sure that you were getting good product rather than really shitty product, which has been cut with all sorts of other things. Ultimately, the way forward is for adults to take responsibility for their own behavior and for society to allow that to happen, and not to have big government taking responsibility for decisions that should be in the hands of individuals.
It's ridiculous to attempt to seize the tiller of reality because we don't even know where we want to go. So the notion that by creating these models of reality, which are not acknowledged as models, but which are called scientific truth, we betray ourselves down the primrose path that leads to dreary, dusty death. Because what we do is we take the poetry out of being. We extract the poetry from being by the assumption of the mundane. The banality of modernity is what I call this. The banality of modernity, the steady flattening of values so that nothing means much. You know, the sense of outrage over political mistreatment of the underprivileged, or the sense of outrage as a society slips toward the abyss, or the sense of outrage when people mistreat you, is muted. Everything is flattened by the banality of modernity. This is the heritage of all the bad little boys of the 19th century, Nietzsche and Darwin and Hegel and Schopenhauer. These clowns were on a bad trip, and they were loud about it. And what they give us is a universe devoid of soul. Man looms larger and larger. Notice the gender slant. Man looms larger and larger in the picture. And what this ushers into is fascism, pure and simple. And it's not surprising, because this calling forth of the image of man into larger and larger perspective has been the program of monotheism for 3,000 years. It has been a relentless accentuation of the centrality of the human image, the male dominant human image. And in the transmutation of Hellenistic Judaism that becomes Christianity, the final apotheosis of this point of view is created in the notion that man can be God. That's it. And it is hailed as a tremendous infusion of existential validity into the human image, the greatest stride ever, the greatest single stride ever taken in the definition of human ontology. Well, I would like to suggest to you it was the greatest backward step ever taken. Because what it did was it shoved nature further and further into the background. Nature is something from which we torment her secrets. This is Francis Bacon. We torture nature to obtain her secrets. The world is created for man. It is for man to remake in his image. But but the message is the same. Man is thrown into the unknown. Man is in the abyss, lost. All meaning must come from within. All order must come from an inner vision. We are abandoned. This is Heideggerian language. We are abandoned. Well, this is permission then for pathology, because it is a point of view purchased at the cost of ignoring the facts of the matter. And that is, in my definition, a delusion. A point of view purchased at the expense of the facts of the matter. You know, Whitehead said there are stubborn facts. You can reduce and reduce all you want, but there are certain stubborn facts. Well, one of them is the primacy of nature, a stubborn fact which was ignored by this tradition. Once nature is taken as the ground of being, then the permission to inflate the image of the ego is denied. And I think that this is happening globally, very slowly, under pressure, under duress, because our backs are to the wall. We are seeing a planetary crisis unfold before our eyes. And, you know, blame has not yet come into the rhetoric, but eventually it's going to be understood who's to blame. And it isn't the tribesmen of New Guinea or the Indians of Siberia. It is Western, male, scientific, technological hubris that has claimed center stage like a noisy drunk and then just proceeded to hold us all prisoner while it acted out a process that is rooted in its own traumatic birth, in the sundering of the symbiotic relationship to the vegetable matrix that characterized prehistory. Well, so what I'm offering as a counterpoint to that is this notion of provisional models. Nature is not mute. This is what Sartre said. Nature is mute. He was another one of these people who pushed this existential line in one form or another. Nature is not mute. Nature is full of affection and intentionality toward humankind. Science runs on induction, which is a very low-grade form of logic. It means you do something over and over again, and if it happens the same way 100 times, you have confidence that the 101st time it will happen the same way. Intuition doesn't work like that. Intuition, as I said the other night, leaves no trail. And most of us are accustomed to thinking of intuition as something feminine, mysterious, unexplainable, and sort of magical. And also, I think, because we live in a male-dominant society, we undervalue it. If someone claims intuition, our position is probably one of prove it, doubt in the face of the assertion. Well, if it means anything, I mean, before we draw the deeper conclusion, what is the conclusion on the surface? It must be that the unaided human mind is more capable of correctly modeling nature than the human mind that works through the methodological inductive approach called science. And in fact, this is clearly true because the world described by science, a scientific description of this room, would say very little about all the important things going on in it. A scientific description of this room would leave out personality, would leave out linguistic intent, would leave out the uniqueness of each of us. For science, we are merely members of the human species. Again, this flattening, this reductionism, this betrayal of the quintessence of the phenomenon in a desperate effort to achieve closure in the modeling process. And so then you do achieve closure, but the model is always inadequate. It's It's always inadequate. So then there's this sense of frustration. We can't get closure with the model unless we tell a lie, unless we deny the complexity, the interrelatedness, the soulness, the spiritness, the mindfulness. All of these things are, for science, what are called secondary properties. They are epiphenomenal. They are only an aspect of your point of view, like an iridescence on a butterfly's wing or something like that. In fact, that is the classic reductionist definition of consciousness. It is an iridescence that appears on the surface of neural processing that we mistake for true being.
I think we're in a weird place in society where the term drug is a blanket and it covers things that have vastly different effects. It covers caffeine, it covers nicotine, and it covers dimethyltryptamine, which is crazy. It's crazy that all those things are drugs. Adderall's a drug. Benzodiazepine is a drug. Xanax, there's a million of them. They're all different, and they're all drugs. And the idea that psychedelics are a drug, for lack of a better term, that's what we use. I don't think that's what they are at all. I think they are probably why we became people. I think they are probably why society advanced. And I think every great ancient culture probably celebrated them and used them. It seems like there's so much evidence out of Egypt of the use of psilocybin, various different drugs, various different psychedelic experiences. The iconography of the pineal gland seems to be a big part of multiple cultures. They reference as the seat of the soul, and that this gland, which is in the center of your brain, is thought to be literally a third eye. And on reptiles, it actually has a cornea and a lens, this gland. Like literally, it's exactly where the third eye of Eastern mysticism is. And they've got a representation of it right here. And it's thought to be where dimethyltryptamine is produced. Grows right. It all kind of makes sense that these people were having these experiences much like the Greeks were with the Eleusinian mysteries, much like multiple different cultures in the Amazon, all over the world have experienced these profound ceremony experiences that lead to these journeys into the spirit world, these connections with higher consciousness, this something that when you're experiencing it seems very, very real, but also very preposterous. Understanding that that's possible, the world changes because now you know that that's possible. You could live your whole life and not know that the most shocking, profound thing in existence is 3 hits away. 3 hits away. And all of a sudden, you're in a completely different universe in 20, 30 seconds. That's nuts. And the fact that that is dismissed, that people look at it as like, oh, you're just escaping reality, and you're like, it might be the source of civilization itself. It might be the source of language. It might be the source of the expansion of the human mind over a period of 2 million years, the doubling of the human brain over a period of 2 million years, which Terence McKenna felt directly coincides with the shifting of the tropical rainforest turning into grasslands, which would force these primates to experiment with new food sources, and these ungulate cows that were everywhere that would shit, and then these psilocybin mushrooms would grow in their shit. Observed primates flipping over these cow patties, looking for beetles and grubs and things to eat. It's everywhere. Like you could see it all over Africa. If there's something on that, they're going to try it out. And if these things are trying it out and they're doing this over a period of 2 million years, and they develop language and culture and weapons, and they start thinking about things, and they become different than every animal around them. And this was McKenna's stoned ape theory, which I'm sure you're familiar with. And Dennis McKenna, who is, a legitimate scientist, Dennis explains it even better because he explains it with the actual mechanisms that your brain, the things that fire up when you encounter high dose psilocybin experiences that would lead you to the development of language, glossolalia, the connection of sounds and objects and bringing things together in a manner of communication. Also, they realized that in low doses, it increases visual acuity. It makes people more amorous, makes people hornier. They're going to have more sex. They're going to be better hunters because they could see better. They're going to be a little more sensitive to the environment. They're going to be more aware. Edge detection's different. There's like so many different things that happen that if you're thinking about what made people people, it's a mystery. We want to pretend that we understand things because of the fossil record and this and that. Sure, we kind of understand, but every now and then we find a new human that we didn't even know exists, like Denisovans. What was that? Not even 20 years ago, I don't think. So now there's a whole other branch of human beings that they weren't even aware of 20 years ago. Whatever the fuck happened that took us from all the other primates that are still here and made us this, it's pretty profound. And I have a feeling that psychedelics were at least involved in that process.
Of alchemy, of all things. Alchemy, as I'm sure many of you know, is really the secret tradition of the redemption of spirit from matter. But many of you may imagine that alchemy is simply a discredited pre-scientific obsession of unbalanced minds interested in changing base metals into gold, lead into the stuff of commerce. This is the benighted reputation that alchemy has acquired in a century so given over to the literal and the material and the non-spiritual that it's lost all touch with the adumbrations of meaning that vibrate behind the perceptions of the alchemists. The central conception of alchemy is the conception of the philosopher's stone. What is it? It's the universal panacea at the end of time. It's the chocolate cake that your mother made once a week when you were a child, the panis supersubstantialis. It's all things to all men and all women. If you are hungry, you eat it. If you're dirty, you shower under it. If you need to go somewhere, you sit on it and you fly there. If you have a question, it answers it. It's something that the human mind senses in itself and related to, invoked, worshipped over centuries before the slow rise of the patriarchy and rationalism and materialism turned it into a myth, a fairy tale. It is not a myth or a fairy tale. It is the burning primary reality that lies behind the dross of appearances. Alchemy is based on a philosophy called Hermeticism that was developed in the 1st and 2nd centuries by Gnostic thinkers, Greeks, Jews, people inside the Roman Empire as it was beginning to show the first signs of degradation and decay, who felt a profound disaffection with their world, a disaffection that on the scale of those times was as profound as our own existential disaffection. And the Hermetic philosophers drew back from the rise of Christianity with its doctrine of the fall of man and original sin and the stain of Adam and Eve and that whole thing, and took a different tack and made 2 points which I think we need to recover and live out for ourselves. And the first point was that man, which means men and women, human beings, are divine beings, not lower than the angels, higher than the angels. The message of the alchemical and hermetic thinkers, and the Corpus Hermeticum actually uses the phrase, man is God's brother. we have no idea what it would mean in our own lives if we could throw off the notion of ourselves as fallen beings. We are not fallen beings. When you take into your life the gnosis of the light-filled vegetables, the psychedelic plants that have stabilized the sane societies of this world for millennia, the first message that comes to you is you are a divine being. You matter. You count. You come from realms of unimaginable power and light, and you will return to those realms. The second point that these philosophers wanted this world for millennia, the first message that comes to you is you are a divine being. You matter. You count. You come from realms of unimaginable power and light, and you will return to those realms. The second point that these philosophers wanted to make was that fate can be overcome. Fate can be overcome. Now, for the Greco-Hellenic world, what that meant was the starry engines of the machinery of fate that they saw strewn across the night sky, because they were intensely aware of the power of the zodiac, the stellar shells inhabited by demons that extended out to the unimaginable imperium of the All-Father that was beyond fate. And into that world of astrological fatedness, which is such a strong idea for the Greek mind, the Hermeticists announced fate can be overcome. And they had a novel answer for how this could be done. It can be done through magic, a word not often enough heard in the present world. The overcoming of fate is achieved through magic, and then the stellar machinery becomes not an invasive force into one's life, but an empowering force. Now, some of us may believe in astrology and some of us may not. We are all strongly influenced by the notion of fate, of our powerlessness in an existential world. Jean-Paul Sartre said nature is mute, and we, embedded in the media-dense, message-dense, programming-dense matrix of these hyper-societies that we have created, often feel, I think, like hapless atoms, running endlessly according to the blueprints and programs of unseen masters, whether it's the banking industry, Madison Avenue, whoever. We tend to disempower ourselves. We tend to believe that we don't matter. And in the act of taking that idea to ourselves, we give everything away to somebody else, to something else. So the rebirth of a sense of the stone and its possibility within each of us entails these two ideas: our divinity and our power to overcome fate. There is no inevitability in our lives unless we submit to the idea of inevitability and then give ourselves over to it.
Taoism teaches that there is a power in the universe. It's higher, deeper, and truer than any other force. They call it the Tao. It means the way. Like the Force in Star Wars, the Tao has two sides. Unlike other religions where the higher power is all good and perhaps has an all evil rival, Taoism teaches that we need to learn from both yin and yang. And unlike religions with gods that are personal, the higher power in Taoism is not. Taoists believe that living in harmony with the way, a person will not have to fight against the universe's natural flow. So, for example, listen more, argue less. Be ready to back up or undo something, and you will make even faster progress. Don't worry about being the best. Be who you are. Live simply. Complications take you away from the Tao. The wise person is flexible, Taoists say. Learning to use the Tao is what Taoism is all about. And that's why you should know your yin from your yang.